Welcome back to By Its Cover.
Hey.
Hey. Today's book is Fairy Tale by Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into the book, I want Katie to tell me a story that she makes up on the spot.
Oh my God, I'm so terrible at that.
Make up a story. Let's go.
Okay. Nope. There you go. That's
Come on.
the story.
Okay. Hang
Deep
on.
sigh.
No. I'll give you.
Give me a couple different objects.
Yeah, objects, themes, and stuff. Okay. Blueberries.
Okay.
Hamster.
Okay.
Mountain.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, tell me a story.
Okay. Once upon a time, there was a little hamster. His name was Joe. And Joe was in search of the best blueberries. And everywhere Joe went, he couldn't find good blueberries. Either the bears had already gotten them, or the deer had already found the best patch. And so he kept searching and searching for blueberries. One day he came across a big mountain, and he said, I wonder if that place has good blueberries. But I'm not sure that I can climb a mountain. I'm just a little hamster, and my name is Joe. He came across a fairy who said, What can I help you with, sir? And he said, I just want to find the best blueberries, and I think that they're on top of that mountain, but I'm worried that I can't get there. So the fairy gave him super special powers to be able to reach that mountain. But when he reached it, there were no blueberries. Done.
That was a great story. I liked the imagery that you used. That was very good. Almost Stephen King level.
Oh, yeah.
Who's the author of Fairy Tale.
Yeah.
That was a good intro.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised you read this book. Previously, you said you were not going to read this because you were like, Stephen King? No, not doing it.
I have a problem with Stephen King. And I think it's going to be a lot of what we talk about during this episode.
Oh, great.
And it's not a real problem with Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of a problem with me.
So why did you decide to change your mind and read this book?
Because you texted me and you said it's not a horror.
Awesome. I'm glad that my text message worked.
You said it's more fantasy. And I said, wow, Stephen King? Fantasy? Never heard of it.
Okay.
And so I decided to start reading this book, although I read this book very fast.
Yeah.
Actually, I listened to this book because I didn't have the physical copy of it. Mm-hmm. And I think listening to the book was a good choice because the audio production quality was very good.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, the author did voices. Mm-hmm. Or not the author. Well, actually, Stephen King did a cameo on here.
Oh, neat.
On the audiobook.
That's cool.
But the voice actor did various voices for the different characters, which I thought was very good.
Yeah.
It's hard for me sometimes to listen to a book and the voice actor is monotone.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time distinguishing between the characters when the author would have used italicization or something.
Yeah.
Right, to distinguish between two people.
So what was this book about?
Fairy Tale, I wrote a summary.
Okay. Let's hear it.
A stranger tricks an old man into giving him a secret fantasy world as an inheritance, where he is the hero and saves his dog.
Do you think that he was tricked? I don't think the old man was tricked.
I don't think the old man was tricked. I think the boy was tricked, though.
Yeah, the boy was tricked.
Definitely
he was
tricked.
tricked into inheriting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we should probably tell what the story was actually about.
Okay, do it.
Okay. Because you did the last one.
I did a lot of talking in the last one.
Okay.
Not that has anything to do with this, but you go.
The beginning of this book was not a fairy tale.
Not at all.
The beginning of this book, it was written in the first person by Charlie, who's a young adult, whose mother died when he was young, and his father turned to alcoholism as a way to cope with the loss of his wife. Mm-hmm. Charlie, despite that environment, seems to come out to be an okay kid.
Yeah.
And he prays to God one day and says, hey, if you save my father from alcoholism, I'll somehow repay the debt. Mm-hmm. And soon after, his father does recover from alcoholism, the best that an addict can, in this book. And so Charlie is looking for an avenue to sort of send his energy for how can he sort of give that energy back to the universe, right? Karma style, right? How can he thank God for saving his father, saving them from homelessness? So he, one day just walking down the street back from school, he hears the neighborhood Sandlot version dog barking, right? But he recognizes that it's not sort of that deep growly bark like, hey, I'm going to kill you, but more a cry for help kind of bark.
Yeah.
And if you have dogs, you know the difference. So he goes up to the psycho house, the horror house on the hill, and finds that Mr. Bowditch. Yeah, Adrian Bowditch.
Yeah.
Although Howard Bowditch is the character at the time. He finds that the owner of the psycho house, Howard Bowditch, had fallen and broken his leg on the front steps. He calls 911 from his phone, and that sort of kicks off a relationship between these two unlikely people.
Right.
Mainly because of Charlie's drive to repay the debt given by God. Charlie starts to help the old man. He becomes the old man's recovery plan post-hospital.
Yeah.
Well, Howard Bowditch has a secret. And as Charlie is taking care of Howard, he hears monstrous sounds in the shed outside of the psycho house, which Charlie is cleaning the windows of and everything, right? Becomes best friends with the dog, Radar, who I feel is the best character in this book, is Radar. I think this book should have been fully about Radar, but I digress. And so Charlie asks Howard, hey, what the fuck is in your shed? Howard says, don't worry about it, it's nothing. Straps on a gun, goes into the shed, shoots the shit out of it, comes out, and then a couple days later has a heart attack and dies.
Well, this is after he has paid for his hospitalization in gold.
I was going to get there.
But it's after.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You tell a story.
So, as Katie said, I missed a part. Howard pays, so that everyone's kind of wondering, how is this shut-in going to pay for his hospital bills because he doesn't have health insurance? Charlie's dad looked it up. And Howard tells Charlie to go into the safe, this is a combination, grab 6 pounds of gold, where there was 40 pounds of gold, which is a couple $1 million worth, and take it to a small German guy in the bad part of town and sell it for $74,000.
Yeah.
So Charlie does that and wonders, where the heck is this gold from? Well, then Charlie hears noises from the shed, asks Howard what the fuck is in the shed. Howard says, there's nothing in the shed, be quiet, goes into the shed, shoots whatever was in the shed, comes out, and then has a heart attack a couple days later and dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. After which, Charlie is now the new owner of the psycho house. Howard gave it to him as part of Howard's will. Howard had no one else. So Charlie decides to investigate what the heck is in the shed because Howard left him a voice recording. Telling him to go into the shed. And the reason that Howard wanted Charlie to go into the shed was because there was some fantastical world in a well in the shed where Charlie could reverse the aging of Radar. And throughout this, Radar is aging poorly. She has arthritis, and she's starting to develop a bad cough.
She's like 14 or something, right?
She is old.
Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't specific on age because Charlie never knew the age.
Right.
Howard never told him. And so Charlie embarks on a quest to... Embarks. Woof. Charlie and Radar embark on a quest to go and save Radar's life. Because within this other world, there's a way to reverse time for a specific being, make them younger. And so that's the first half of the book. Yeah. That's what I'm considering the first half. The second half of the book is where Charlie is in this fantastical world. And it sort of becomes a fantasy where, and this is the traditional fantasy. This isn't the fantasy where there's wands and like common magic and like sci-fi type stuff. This is the Disney sort of fantasy. Rumpelstiltskin, the woman with the goose, Mother Goose. Or whatever
there's
it
all
was.
these like equivalent characters in this fantasy world.
Yes.
It is so very intentional and awesome.
It is very intentional. Sort of every story that Disney retold and copyrighted is in this book. So Charlie goes on an adventure. He meets a bunch of people, really nice people. He learns that Howard Bowditch actually is Adrian Bowditch. And Adrian had reverse time on his body through the use of a magical sundial, which is in a castle where he needs to take radar. So he goes on this adventure. He goes into the magical castle land. It's all very dystopian fantasy. Horror fantasy almost, where there's a very bad curse on the land. People who are not of royal blood are turning gray, and their skin is effectively melting together.
Yeah, that's what it really seemed like, that their features were melting or being erased.
Yeah, being erased.
Yeah.
Right? And if you were of royal blood, or, quote, a whole one, end quote, you had other kinds of afflictions. So, for example, the princess of the story had no mouth. Her aunt and uncle had no ears or no eyes.
Right.
So their sensory deprivations sort of curse. He goes, and my favorite part of this book is when he actually gets to the sundial and he saves Radar, because I was incredibly invested in Radar at that point.
Yes, me too.
And Radar becomes 5 years younger because she took 5 turns on the sundial. But when he tries to leave the magical castle city of darkness, a Rumpelstiltskin-like character had erased all of the marks that he would be able to follow to get out of that dark city.
And it was important that he get out by nightfall because of the, what did they call them?
The Night Watch.
No,
Night
that's
Guard.
Game of Thrones.
Night Guard.
Okay, that's your retainer. Was it the Night Guard?
It was the Night Guard.
Okay.
Night Soldiers.
I'm going to go with Night Soldiers because Night Guard reminds me of like a night guard for your teeth.
Blue Electricity or Fiery Boys.
Skeletons, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Undead.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does not get out of the castle city in time.
Nope.
And he gets arrested. Narrowly gets arrested. He almost escaped. But Radar escaped, and that was what was important. He did not escape. He was thrown into the Meline, which is the prison underneath the dark castle. Slowly, his features started to change, and he became the prince that was told. Right?
The stereotypical
Prince, the blonde hair, blue eyes prince. He is forced to fight and kill in an arena, and he devises an escape plan with the help of his new underlings, who all think that he is Prince Charles, the prince that was told through lore and legend, heir of Adrian Bowditch.
Right.
He escapes this prison, makes it out of the castle area with the help of his new friends. And the way that he does that is he kills these electricity, fiery aura boys, skeletons, with water, which I thought was fun.
That was super fun.
And his 22 semi-automatic 22 and 45 revolver, he kills a giant, which is cool. Makes it out of the town, and when he originally had intended to just get in and get out, saving his dog, now he's been there for a long time, and he is the savior of this land and decides, together with his friends, that he needs to save it from the Flight Killer, which is the big bad.
Yeah. Eldon.
Yes, Eldon, who is the princess's brother.
Yeah.
He was an ugly prince, he was an ugly prince, and everyone made fun of him, and so he turned dark and went to the dark well and consumed
Called
evil.
on Cthulhu.
Called on Cthulhu. Gog Magog.
Yes.
Gog Magog.
Yeah.
So anyway, they, rally and decide to embark on a war against Eldon, the flight killer, channeling Cthulhu, Gog Magog. The princess is now with them, which is also Mother Goose. They make their way down the set of stairs together with radar, very important, and kill Eldon.
Yep.
And shut the door, preventing Gog Magog from coming out. In a very dramatic flurry of, I know your name, and so you must be afraid of me.
Very fantastical.
Yeah. He says, if you eat me, I will destroy you from the inside because I know your name and I will use your name to destroy you. Which was cool.
It was cool.
And then he gets out
Yeah.
of the castle and he goes back home where he tells his father, who had been putting missing posters up for him, that he had been in some fantastical land where he saved Radar.
Yeah.
And his father almost doesn't believe him, but then does believe him.
Mm-hmm. And they concrete it off, so it never...
And they concrete it off so that no one can ever go back down there because of all of the gold that's down there. It's El Dorado, right?
Yeah.
And he was worried about militant soldiers going down and plundering that city and, killing everyone.
Right. And it seems like in that world, gold is just very much more prevalent. And there are a lot of things that they don't have that our world has or Charlie's world has, that Adrian brought little gifts and things. I thought it was a really cool concept. The Cthulhu-esque Gog Magog that's coming out of this other well inside this world leads you to believe and understand that there are worlds, that all of these different worlds are connected potentially with these well-type things.
Yeah, it's turtles all the way down.
Right.
And I think I was reflecting on this one a little bit because it's not unique to pull in other stories into a story, right? This was a crossover of Charlie and all of the sort of lore-esque folk tales of old.
Right.
Right. I forgot where I was going.
You were thinking about this.
Oh, I was thinking about this.
Unique.
I think it was intentional.
For sure.
Stephen King did it intentionally. He knew what he was doing, of course. He's a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool to watch Charlie become part of the story. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean Charlie as a character becoming a part of a story, but Charlie became the embodiment of someone else's story.
Right. It was so cool.
Yeah. His body has changed.
His eye color, everything.
Yeah. Without reason was able to accomplish things that he otherwise would not have been able to accomplish. Right. Like he had extra strength if he really tried.
Yeah.
Right. He was in love with the princess.
Yeah.
For no good reason.
Right.
And that drove him to go and save the kingdom. Which is very much in line with sort of fantasy, where they never really explain why the prince and princess love each other.
Right.
They're just attracted to each other, and as a result, they save the world.
That's one of my favorite things about this book, was that all of those stereotypical fantasies, or the fantasies that you hear about, the children's books like Rumpelstiltskin and the Mother Goose, and there's the shoe. She wasn't the shoemaker. She was a shoe fixer.
Lady with the shoe.
Yeah, yeah. And, things like that. Cthulhu. There were so many things pulled into this. And then Stephen King also added this element of, things you would traditionally find in maybe aged fantasy. Mm-hmm. The giant is ugly and big and has these boils or acne or whatever.
And
farts. Gosh, how dare she fart.
Right.
And the princess is beautiful despite this thing on her face where she has to pierce the straw into her, and she has to pierce that thing open in order to feed herself, basically.
Because she has no mouth.
Right, because she has no mouth. It's been welded shut or melted shut or whatever. And down to Charlie becoming blonde and blue-eyed or whatever. That was just so in your face. I'm writing stereotypical kind of outdated fantasy where all the people who are saviors are not saviors, but the savior, the prince, he's Prince Charming. He's blue-eyed, blonde hair, and the gray that's overtaking all the people who aren't royal blood and all that, kind of garbage. He turned it into a really interesting fantasy story.
Yeah, but I think Stephen King broke the fourth wall a couple of times on purpose. He talks about how the other world, the world that Charlie is exploring, is written by the stories of the world above.
Yeah, that was super interesting too.
And so I think that Charlie became a story that someone else was telling.
Yeah.
And I think that's very fourth wall, because Stephen King is writing the story of Charlie.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way.
Right. So there's a couple times where Stephen King sort of broke that wall and talked about if Charlie says to himself, if I was a character in a story, right, then I would be able to do this thing. And sure enough, he was eventually able to do this thing. And Stephen King, he told you the whole story at the very beginning through subtle sort of foreshadowing. Right? And I think a good author does that and you don't realize it. And then as you get into the story, you're like, holy shit, like that's what he said at the beginning, right? I think Stephen King did that. But I want to talk about one aspect of the writing style of this, which I really thoroughly enjoyed.
Okay.
Okay. And again, this is my first Stephen King book.
You've never read another Stephen King book?
I've never read another Stephen King book.
Wait a second. So
I tried to read one of his books when
Which
you
one?
were deep into Stephen King.
Oh, yeah, I really was.
It's probably like Cat Cemetery or
Pet
something.
Cemetery? That one is one of his scariest
So
books.
I tried it. I read the first paragraph. I was like, nah, this is going to screw me up.
Yeah.
So I didn't. So this is my first Stephen King book.
Okay.
I think there's two things that Stephen King does on a technical writing aspect that I really like. One of them is pacing. The closer that Radar got to being healed, the slower the story went. Right? It was really fast interaction with Dora, really fast interaction with Claudia and Woody, right, and the princess. And then when he walks up to that fucking sundial, he was describing every aspect of it. And of course, Stephen knows that I'm really invested in Radar.
Right.
Stephen knows I want Radar to live. But he's describing the stupid sundial, and then inserts like, oh, Radar starts coughing a lot, right? And it's getting worse, and she's wheezing. And then he keeps describing the sundial. So, and he did that a couple times, right? The closer that you got as a reader to the main character accomplishing something, the slower the pace went. And I think that was really good. Like, Stephen King does a great job at playing on your emotions there, right? He knows what you want, and he's going to slow it down to make you feel that longer.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a better story. The other technical writing or thing that Stephen King does from a technical writing aspect, I have forgotten since starting the pacing one.
What was your favorite thing about this book then?
Radar. I could have stopped halfway through the book and been satisfied.
Yeah.
I really didn't care about Charlie. I really didn't care if the other world was saved. I didn't care about the gold. It was Radar, the German Shepherd dog. Like, as soon as Radar was healed, I'm like, okay, why am I still reading this book?
Right.
Let's switch to Radar as the main character. I want to know that she's, okay, Charlie's dead, but whatever. Like,
Did she make it out?
Did she make it out?
Yeah. What was your least favorite part of this book?
Good question. I think my least favorite part of this book. Oh, I remember the other technical writing thing.
Okay, let's go back to that.
Okay. So, and it was on my notes here. I just read the wrong line. So the other thing that I think Stephen King does a really good job at, and it actually has to do with my least favorite thing of this book. So they're related. So thank you for reminding me. Matthew Mercer, as a DM for Critical Role, talks about, he's a fantastic storyteller. And he talks about, as he guides the characters through the story, he introduces punishment. Nothing is for free.
Yeah.
Right? And if you reflect back on a lot of other fantasy books that we've read as kids or as an adult, something that I bring up in previous books is the magic has no rules. There's no punishment, right?
Right.
But Charlie was punished for saving Radar.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Charlie was punished for speaking out. It was very real punishment that you felt that if Charlie had misbehaved in the cell in Deep Moline, he would have died, right? And I think from a writing aspect, that's really important. Storytelling, really important, because as a reader, I feel for the main character that they aren't all powerful and just able to escape, right? It leaves you in that dark feeling of like, holy crap, how is Charlie going to get out of prison?
Yeah.
Right? Because he's going to get punished if he tries. Versus in different books, you'd be like, oh, well, I mean, obviously Charlie is just going to become almighty and destroy things. But that brings me to my almost least... I liked everything about this book.
Okay.
But my least favorite part, I think, was how easily the Dark Soldiers were killed by water. I liked the way that Stephen King got there.
Yeah, I did too.
With the hairdryer and him and the princess sitting next to the pond, right? And he's like, oh, why is that in my visions?
Yeah.
But I felt like it might have been a little too easy. Because in the span of a couple of chapters, all of the night soldiers were dead.
Yeah, that happened very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
The pace was really quick then. And I think that talking about pacing, I think that was good.
Yeah.
Like you're feeling adventure, you're feeling the time compression of the need for Charlie to get out and get the princess and get into the dark well before the two moons kiss, right? But it went a little too fast when it came to killing what is effectively at that point Charlie's worst enemy.
Right. Except it's not, though, because you've got Eldon and the flight killer. Like, that's really the bad guy. I really liked that not that they died so fast, but the use of water for electricity, I really liked that. Because it was so apparent, like, and he made it apparent in the book, that this world does not naturally have electricity. That was something that Adrian Bowditch brought as a gift. And so I think connecting that was really interesting. That was a reason why Charlie knew to use the water.
But his prison mates didn't.
Right, because they had never seen electricity.
Oh.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. Where I would say, okay, well, why didn't the other prisoners...
Why didn't they do it? They've never seen it. It's magic to them.
Oh. Okay. I mean, like when you say what's your least favorite part of the book, I'm like, well, that's the least favorite part. And then you're like, well, actually, blah, blah, blah. And I rethink it. There's no real part of this book I didn't necessarily like.
Yeah.
But what was your favorite part of this book?
Oh, there were some really cool images in this book. I think radar was one of my favorite parts, too. Very invested in the dog. The monarch butterflies being such a huge feature in that world and having such power, I thought that was really cool. They're just like hordes of butterflies. And I think that the callbacks to all of these different fairy tales, and even to H.P. Lovecraft with Cthulhu and that Cthulhu-esque creature that Eldon has become or is worshipping or whatever. He's got some features of it with all the tentacles and stuff. It was just really, really cool the way he tied all of that in. And I'm a sucker for stories like that. I remember, this is a book podcast, but back in the day I watched Once Upon a Time. And I was really into that when that first came out or when I first started watching it. Never finished it, but the whole, these fairy tale characters having real lives and what they would look like in real life, that's kind of what this felt like to me a little bit, and I really loved that. Really, really loved that.
What about your least favorite part?
Okay, my least favorite part, I don't know if it's a least favorite, but what I didn't understand the need for, why did the roaches have to die? If they weren't harmful, Adrian tells Charlie in his recording, what you'll find won't hurt you. It's going to die from the air. And basically you're helping it die. Why did Adrian ever have to go over there and kill it in the first place, causing himself to be so stressed out to have a heart attack and die?
It was the exposure.
He was visibly worried about it.
It's the exposure, because the roaches were big enough to move the boards. They'd be big enough to break the shed.
Yeah.
And if they got out, it would bring questions to why is there a giant roach right? The size of a tomcat, I think it was.
And then it would start an investigation of where it came from, which would lead to the well, which would lead to the other world.
Right. So Adrian wanted to keep it murdered inside the shed.
Thanks for clearing that up for me.
I think, anyway.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Tarp the shed?
Tarp?
Yeah. Put a big old tarp over it.
You would still have the roach breaking. If a roach can break a board, it can break plastic.
The reality is that Adrian probably should have blocked off that world earlier.
And they talked about that.
They did talk about that.
Right. When...
Lots of quotes in there about something that Adrian had said, or... Yeah, Adrian had said it, or Howard, when he was Howard.
Well, it was, a coward brings presents, a brave man helps.
Right.
But that's not why he didn't do it.
No.
I don't think. When Princess Leia...
Is her name Leia?
Leia. Yeah, not Leia.
Not Leia.
Which
Leia.
is a reference. He actually talks about, it's not Princess Leia. I spelled it wrong.
Oh,
It's
that's
Princess
right.
Leia.
Yeah.
So when Princess Leia asked Charlie if he had taken a ride on the sundial, he said, no, I haven't. And he told Princess Leia that Adrian had. Mm-hmm. And Princess Leia asked if Adrian was good. And Charlie reflected on Adrian Bowditch and determined that maybe he wasn't good because of something that Adrian had said, which was a coward brings presents, a brave man helps. And he just brought toys from the overworld into the underworld, and then evacuated when things got really hairy. Yeah. Right? Just stole the gold and otherwise kept the cabin there. Mm-hmm. And Adrian was really worried about the underworld becoming discovered and exploited, but didn't cement it over, right? And, cement is temporary anyway.
Right. I kept thinking about that too.
In 100 years, when Charlie is dead, somebody will want to build a new shopping mall and we'll discover it, but Charlie will have been dead by that point.
Right. Yeah, and that was like such a, at minimum, even if Adrian wasn't bad, you could tell that he felt that he was. Like Adrian thought poorly of his own decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was very self-deprecating. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was such a cool book.
This was a really good book. I also really liked the Howard Bowditch. Which is the same as Adrian Bowditch, just it's a little bit different of a timeline.
He rode the sundial.
No, Adrian Bowditch rode the sundial.
Right.
Howard Bowditch was the shut-in. They're the same person, but I think they're two different characters.
They're different characters. Like Adrian eventually turns into Howard.
Right. Adrian turns into Howard.
They are the same person, but
Adrian is the logger adventurer, right? That goes to the other world. Howard is the shut-in that lives in the house on the side of the street.
After riding the sundial.
Yeah. My favorite part about Howard was where he says everything. He just puts in cuss words everywhere, pass the fucking salt. Yeah, that's
quintessential. He was the quintessential grumpy old man on the block who is alone and grumpy and hates the kids on his lawn and all the stuff. And
when I was reading this book, I was saying "God damn" a lot. Mm-hmm. I was channeling my Howard Bowditch. Yeah. And so my wife and I would walk around the house just saying "God damn." Did you let the goddamn dogs in?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. There was also that was kind of another punishment that Adrian bore, or Howard bore, was that by riding the sundial, he became, what's the word? Sterile.
Which is honestly not a bad punishment.
Weird.
If I could go and ride a sundial and get 20 or 40 years back in my life and just become sterile, but forget about it. Done in a second.
No surgery for you.
No, I already had it. Joke's on you, great godly magic. I already had the vasectomy.
What were your thoughts on the first Rumpelstiltskin-esque character, Christopher Pauli?
He was cool. I never really understood how Christopher Pauli got into Charlie's world, but a part of me thinks that Charlie's world also has a well that leads up. Yeah. And, you could think of it as Gog Magog slowly consuming the worlds as he rises through the turtles that go all the way down. Mm-hmm. So eventually Charlie's world will be consumed by Gog Magog, right? The other world will be consumed. Charlie's world will be consumed. The next world will be consumed. And it's an infinite loop. But I didn't really know how the first Rumpelstiltskin character really got there.
Yeah, I kept wondering if he was from this other world. But I like your idea about him being from another world up.
Yeah, like, he talks about, and we'll have to go look at the history of these stories. Mm-hmm. I sort of think Rumpelstiltskin may be one of the first original stories. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps that story goes deeper than one other world.
I love that. That is so cool. I love that. Had you ever heard of Gog Magog before this?
No.
So not long after I read this book, I was searching in Libby for another book to pick. And I added a book called Gog Magog to my wait list, to my hold list. Because I was like, Gog Magog? What the heck? That's not Stephen King. What is this? And then I read about it, and it's an actual, it comes from a biblical term. Did you know that?
Yeah, he says it in the book.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah, he says Gog Magog's from the Bible.
Okay, no, I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that, but I didn't realize there were other stories. I don't know.
I mean, if it's from the Bible, there must be other stories.
There's got to be tons of other stories.
We haven't heard that before.
Right.
Because they don't preach about Gog Magog in Methodist Christian churches.
They don't. No, they don't.
Maybe
not like Puritans.
Yeah, maybe if we were Puritans, or
oh my gosh,
if we went to Western Baptist churches where fear is more important part of the religion, we would have heard about Gog Magog.
But we didn't. So I've added that to my book list.
Okay. What's the next book that we're going to talk about?
It's called A Complex Coast.
By?
Don't remember. Didn't write it down on the spreadsheet.
Sounds good.
Should be a quick read, though. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.